The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
As a completely out of touch, as an insult to the intelligence of the American people, and the lived experience.
Luigi Mangione yelled at reporters as he was walked into court by police in Pennsylvania late last night. The 26-year-old was officially charged with murdering Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan. He's also facing separate charges in Pennsylvania.
Mangione was arrested at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania on Monday. Altoona police released these photos from that McDonald's taken from a police body camera. Officers said that he began to shake when they asked if he had recently spent time in New York City. But New York City's police commissioner also said on the Today Show this morning his name was not on their radar.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. All right, the Luigi Mangione is heating up. So that was a clip. That's the latest and greatest. That was from yesterday, where they were basically it looked like they were taking him into either a jail or the courtroom to get indicted. And he was pretty much yelling. He's like, this is completely out of touch and an insult to the American people. So that's really all they got captured. And, I don't know, man. I don't know. That reaction that he had yesterday when they were taking him, that made a lot more sense to me. Like, again, if he did not do it, if that was me, I'd be screaming at the top of my lungs, really more than even what he said. I'd be like, I didn't do it. I'm being framed. Like, I would just repeat myself over and over again. Kind of like when you had Lee Harvey Oswald get interviewed when he was accused of, or they asked him, did you kill JFK? And he said, I'm a patsy.
Come on, man. No, they're taking me in because of the fact that I lived in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy.
That's pretty wild. So literally, as I said patsy earlier, I was like, oh, I wonder if I can find the Lee Harvey Oswald clip. And I opened up TikTok. I searched Oswald patsy. Boom. Came up. With TikTok, it's amazing. A lot of times most of the time people allow you to save the video. You press a button, save to phone. It saves the file to my phone. I then airdropped it from my iPhone to my MacBook, and boom, I brought it into GarageBand. And next thing you know, you guys just heard Lee Harvey Oswald say that he's a patsy. Isn't that cool? That's pretty damn cool. Now with YouTube, I've talked about this before. I'm totally off track for a minute here, but I've talked about this before. But with YouTube and even Instagram, it takes multiple steps for me to save down clips. That's why I love TikTok for that. Like, I can just search something. Chances are it'll come up. Ideally, they've enabled you to be able to save the video. I save video. Boom, it's on my phone. AirDrop it to my computer and play it for you guys. Love that. All right, anyway, let's see what plays out with this Luigi Mangione. I mean, obviously, I think now we have something that's going to completely take up our attention, at least for the next several weeks, at least for a week. This will definitely last all week as being like the primary thing people are talking about. And I will say, I talked about this a little bit yesterday, and then I posted something on Instagram, which... one thing that's so interesting about this situation is there's like a generational divide about what is going on here. And what I mean by that is, our generation, let's say Gen X, anybody over, I don't know, let's say 35 maybe, anybody over 35, I think we are all in the same camp. And that camp is that even though United Healthcare and their denial rates and all of that is terrible, and fundamentally the healthcare system in America is broken, I think that, the Gen X generation and maybe even some millennials are kind of like, okay, yeah, the system's broken, but you can't go around killing CEOs because the system is broken. And honestly, I do feel that way. That's just anarchy. But I will tell you, man, this younger generation, and this is apparent on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, everything, they're kind of like they're making, let's say Luigi did it, they're turning him into a hero, and they're like, oh, he's going to get acquitted if it's a jury of his peers, free Luigi, free Luigi. And so there's no accountability for your actions. And I don't know, man. I don't think that's correct. And I am seeing this sort of generational divide where the younger generation it's almost like the ends justify the means. And I think with kind of the pre-social media generation, which Gen X falls into, and obviously baby boomers and all that, I don't think we look at it like that. The end does not justify the means. Am I using that correctly? The ends justify the means. Well, you get my point. All right, let me read these to you because this is what I posted yesterday. So this slide said, assuming Luigi did it, this murder of a CEO is showing what a generational divide there is when it comes to morality and just right versus wrong. United Healthcare sucks. I get that. But blaming the system doesn't justify murdering a CEO. All right, so that was the first slide. And then the second slide was I took somebody's tweet off of Twitter and I said, now, this is also worth reading in case he did not do it. So this guy made a really good point in terms of just the overall situation. So he said, so you're telling me Luigi Mangione, an Ivy League grad with 130 plus IQ, takes off his mask at a Starbucks to flirt with an employee, ruining his anonymity. An hour later, he calmly murders the United Healthcare CEO and rides off on a bicycle. A week later, he shows up at McDonald's carrying the murder weapon, a fake ID used during the crime, and a written manifesto against the American healthcare system. He gets recognized by a cashier after sitting down, then works on his laptop, armed with a loaded gun and suppressor he made himself, until police walk in and arrest him on the spot. They're distracting us from something. So, I mean, that's worth listening to as well. And I ended it with anything is plausible. All right, so that is an update on the Luigi Mangione situation. I'll keep you kind of breasted with next steps, but man, expect the unexpected on that. And the bottom line is, did he do it or did he not do it? And if he did do it, I don't accept any justification for that. He needs to be held to justice because, man, that was just brutal. That's brutal. You just can't go around, killing people like that. And then if he didn't do it, then what's going on? Who did it? Who's framing him? Is he a patsy? What's going on? All that jazz. So, all right, we'll see what happens. Okay, now to probably the most crazy switch of topics ever. And this is going to be wild. But so for those of you that have known me for a while, and especially if you've followed or been connected with me on Facebook, maybe for the past, gosh, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, maybe I used to do this before that, but no, maybe the past 6 or 7 years, you'll remember that, once I was doing it once a quarter, meaning 4 times a year. I can't say I did that in 2024. I actually only did it once, and that was on Monday. And that is, I drink a 10-ounce bottle of Magnesium Citrate, which is a saline laxative oral solution. It's sugar-free. It's for relief of occasional constipation, which I don't use it for that because I don't get constipated. But I use it for use in bowel cleaning systems or surgery or exam preparation. Now, I didn't have any surgery or exam preparation. I was not getting a colonoscopy or anything along those lines, but I basically do it like I'm going to try to do it maybe twice in 2025. I don't know if I need to do, or you for that matter, need to do it once a quarter. That might be a little too much, but twice a year might not be a bad call, at least once a year. And basically I drink this 10-ounce, bottle of magnesium citrate, and it pretty much cleans me out. It pretty much gives me liquid diarrhea. Some people that are not familiar with Ray D are like, what the hell does this guy do? But it does. It pretty much gives you diarrhea. But the reason I do it is because, I really believe in getting rid of anything that is kind of attached, the fecal matter and the feces that are attached inside your colon. So inside your small intestine, your large intestine, your stomach, your entire digestive tract really has residue fecal matter, believe it or not, that kind of is always there. And this magnesium citrate, along with 8 or 10 ounces of water, even more, pretty much washes you out. It's almost like, think about if you could stick a garden hose down your throat, and don't ever do that, by the way, and basically just flush out your system. And that's pretty much what it does. I mean, it takes different amount of time to kick in for different people. And I'll take you through my results because I actually chronicled them on Monday into an iPhone note. But again, it pretty much flushes you out. And, like I said, I like seeing what comes out. And so without being super gross, I am going to talk you through this process. Cause like I said, I took it down in a iPhone note. All right. Actually, you know what? I did not take it down in an iPhone note. I took it down in a calendar event. So you know what? I'd actually recommend, if you do this process, create a calendar, create a calendar event, because then inside your calendar, whether you use your Apple Calendar or your Google Gmail calendar, you could always be like, hey, what were my results from my cleanse? And you can type in cleanse as a keyword and boom, it'll come up. So here you go. Let me walk you through this. So I titled the event Cleanse Day, took 10 ounces. And basically at 10:30 a.m. last Monday, a couple days ago, I drank all 10 ounces, and then I drank 2 glasses of water. So maybe another 12 to 15 ounces of water. Okay, so for me, by the way, when people do this, they have different reactions, but I basically had my first movement in 15 minutes. Like at 10:45, I had my first movement. And again, I'm not going to make this gross, but basically that first movement was like, it's diarrhea. It is. It was like, what? I wrote down, why? I'm telling you, this is good for your health, by the way. I keep laughing. But all right, I wrote down 1 blast, very dark. So now here's the other thing I want to tell you about this. And again, I know it's gross. I'm sorry, but this is for your health. So bear with me. So that morning, because I drank this at 10:30, I mean, I had already drank pretty much like 3 or 4 cups of coffee. I have like 3 or 4 cups of coffee every morning. And I had multiple bowel movements already. And so what's crazy to me, and actually what makes me want you to do this more than anything is, so think about that. I had already had multiple bowel movements. And when I drank the 10 ounces of the magnesium citrate along with 10 to 12 ounces of water, that first movement, you would think that if you've already had bowel movements, you would think your stomach and colon and intestines are empty, so it would be clear, but it wasn't. It was incredibly dark. So again, that's gross, I know, but think about that. I had already had multiple bowel movements that morning, and then this magnesium citrate kind of triggered the diarrhea, and it was dark. So that was at 10:45. My second movement was at 11:10. So like 25 minutes later, I had the second movement. Again, one blast, one blast, dark still but lighter. Third movement, 11:25. So 15 minutes later, I had the third movement, one blast, definitely lighter this time and less liquid overall. Fourth movement came just 12 minutes later, 11:37 a.m. One blast and continues to be lighter. I drank some more water afterwards. At 11:47, so 10 minutes later, I had my fifth movement, and it says same and significantly lighter. And then I had my sixth movement at 12:53. I wrote down one last hurrah, although I did drink a bunch of tea prior. Still some color, but much lighter. Okay, my seventh movement, you guys are freaking out by now. Some of you I know are. My seventh movement at 1:18, so like 25 minutes later, same as before, noticeably lighter. And then I ate lunch. So I thought I was done. I was like, okay, remember, I started this process at 10:45. It is now 1:18, so 11, 12. So 3 hours later, I thought I was totally done. So I did have lunch. I had a nice New York strip steak for lunch. And I did end up having an eighth movement after lunch, which I wrote down. I was a little surprised on that one. Again, all liquid and much clearer. So there you have it, folks. There you have a chronology of my 8 bowel movements for drinking magnesium citrate. But I'm telling you, I felt fantastic the rest of the day. I really did. I weighed myself before and after, and literally I weighed 3 pounds less before I had lunch. So after the 7 movements, I weighed 3 pounds less. So think about that. 16 ounces is 1 pound. So basically 48 ounces of stuff that was inside my colon and my digestive system was taken out of my digestive system. That's awesome, actually. That seriously is. Like the fact that crap, pun intended, is no longer in my body and all that stuff that kind of lines your intestinal tract is removed from my body. I think that's incredibly healthy. You know, that's also how a lot of people end up getting diverticulitis because there's so much that's kind of stuck to your intestinal walls, and then these little pockets end up forming, and food basically gets caught inside those pockets, and that leads to a whole mess of problems. So anyway, that is the Ray D Magnesium Citrate Cleanse. I really do recommend it at least once a year. And if you want to just do it once a year, that's great. You know, make sure you're doing it on a day where at least for 4 to 5 hours, you know, you don't need to necessarily leave the house and you have access to a latrine, aka your bathroom. And there you have it. I love it. I love doing it. I genuinely do. And I love the fact that I feel like I have cleaned out my intestinal tract. So how about that? How about going from Luigi and a murder to cleaning out my bowels? That's pretty funny. All right, let's do a topic change. We're going to talk a couple more things. I've played this guy before, Jimmy Dore. He's a comedian. He's actually, I think he might be a libertarian. If he's not a libertarian, he's definitely a Democrat. Dude is not a Republican, but he's one of those guys that really does call a spade. And so give this a listen.
Establishment media is freaking out that there's citizen journalists that are actually exposing the lies of the establishment media. When they lied to us about Vietnam through 4 different presidents, when they lied about Iraq in 1992, when they lied about Iraq again in 2001, when they lied about Libya, when they lied about Syria, when they lied about January 6th, when they lied about COVID and vaccines and lockdowns and masks, when they lied about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, when they lied to you at the top of their lungs about all the most important things in the world. They're currently lying to you right now about Ukraine. Most of my asswipe friends in Hollywood still believe the mainstream news media. They believe anything they're told. Anything they're told. They believe everything they're told about Ukraine. They have no idea that the United States and NATO provoked that war on purpose and want to keep it going.
Man, he really listed a bunch of things that honestly, we have been misled on, absolutely. And, the one he ended on, he's definitely one of the people that's been banging the drum about, the entire conflict in Ukraine, being something that was provoked by the expansion of NATO. And we've talked about that a million times. And that is fact. That is absolute fact. So, okay, next up, my man, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Give this a listen.
Just like Israel could not fight one day without the United States, and that's literally true, I'm sorry to say. Hezbollah and Hamas could not fight a day without Iran and other support. This costs money. This is big weapons. This is a political issue. This is not a terrorist issue.
All right, so really quick, Professor Jeffrey Sachs is definitely probably even more critical of Benjamin Netanyahu than I am. And, he really considers Netanyahu the instigator to so many things. And a lot of people do. I mean, a tremendous amount of people actually think that, many maybe don't voice it as much as he does. But give this a listen.
Netanyahu's absolute devastating mistake, which he writes about in 1996 in his book, Fighting Terrorism. It's the whole explanation of why he's so messed up in his head. He says,
really quick, so pay attention to this next part, because listen to the countries that he names. And if you didn't listen to yesterday's episode where I quoted or I played the clip from General Wesley Clark, where he brought that memo from the Pentagon, from Donald Rumsfeld's office or one of those guys' office, that they talked about overthrowing 7 countries in 5 years. So again, where did that come from? That came from Netanyahu. That's pretty wild.
Because we have Hamas and Hezbollah, and they are supported by Syria, by Iraq, by Iran, by Sudan, by Libya. We have to overthrow all the governments that support these. I'm not making this up. This is in print. Then he explains it to the U.S. Congress in 2000. He explains this. I know this because I study this for a living.
Okay, this is really important, actually, and he got cut off, and that's why I wanted to jump in. He was basically going down the path of saying he explains this in 2002, and again, this was in front of the U.S. Congress in 2002. For those of you that have been paying attention, you'll remember he basically spoke to Congress maybe 4 or 5 months ago, 22 years later in 2024, this year. But in 2002, he came in front of Congress, and let me pull that speech for you. And by he, I mean Benjamin Netanyahu. So here's Benjamin Netanyahu in 2002. Remember, right after 9/11, basically.
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. And I think that people sitting right next door in Iran, young people, and many others will say the time of such regimes, of such despots, is gone.
This is seriously crazy important, because the same exact thing is happening right now, 22 years later, both with Gaza, Hezbollah, Syria now. And again, obviously the kingpin for Netanyahu has always been Iran. But remember, this is 2002, 9/11's happened, and Netanyahu was one of the people that basically said, let's go after Saddam Hussein. Well, why Saddam Hussein? He didn't have anything to do with 9/11. Oh, because Saddam's got weapons of mass destruction. And we all know how that ended up. It was a complete lie. But he knew it was a lie. George W. Bush knew it was a lie. They all knew it was a lie. Saddam Hussein in Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, but they used that as a pretense to invade. I mean, that's crazy. When you think about it, that is seriously crazy. All right, let's go back to Jeffrey Sachs and let him finish now that you've heard the Netanyahu 2002 that he was referencing in front of Congress.
Then he explains it to the U.S. Congress in 2000. He explains this. I know this because I study this for a living. He explains this to the American Congress. You overthrow Saddam, it'll be beautiful. Look what'll happen in Iran next door. The plan was 7 wars in 5 years. This is all well documented. The problem is not Hamas and Hezbollah. Why? Because if you make an agreement with Iran, if you make an agreement with the Arab countries, they will be disarmed and dismembered as part of the agreement.
That is an incredibly astute point. So let me just drive that home. Basically, what he's saying is the problem is not Hamas and Hezbollah, because if those are getting funded by Iran, Iraq, well, really right now it's just Iran. If they're getting funded by Iran, well, when you make a deal with Iran and you say, hey, no more sanctions if you do X, Y, and Z, and stop doing this and stop doing this, and we'll buy your oil and let's be friends, they're not going to say yes to that and then continue to fund these proxy fighters that are fighting on their behalf. That's a really insightful comment he made. Let's see where he goes with it. But that makes so much sense. Make a deal with the boss, and then the lieutenants, they don't even exist anymore.
This is so obvious. This is an excuse. This is not a reality. This is an excuse of Netanyahu, who has been the biggest disaster in Israel's history by far.
God, I don't know if I can get Jeffrey Sachs on, but I'm going to try. I think he makes a lot of sense. And if you feel differently, I'd love to hear your opinion about it. But I will say, in summary of that, I think it's an excuse, absolutely, but not just for Netanyahu. It's an excuse for the entire military-industrial complex. This really ties everything we've talked about for 240-something episodes together. It really does. I mean, think about it. If there are no wars and there's no boogeyman and there's no big bad wolf and there's no enemy, then there's no need for all this military funding. And if there's no need for all this military funding, all these government contracts with your taxpayer money, they go away. It's pretty wild, man. Seriously, if you really separate your emotions from it and take all this in collectively and think about how much money would be freed up if we didn't spend $900-something billion a year, over $1 trillion a year on a defense budget, and which, by the way, fails 23 audits in a row. Think about that. It's failed 23 audits in a row. I've played that clip from Jon Stewart for you guys. Think about if all that money went back into the country, went back into the infrastructure, if that money went into training people on how to use AI. Think about that. Dude, that's insane. That is insane when you look at things from a macro perspective. Oh, man. All right, let me see if there's anything else I want to play for today. Oh, my God, there's been so much going on with Luigi that I completely forgot about this.
Tonight, explosive allegations against legendary rapper and mogul GenZ, whose real name is Sean Carter. A new civil lawsuit is accusing him of raping a 13-year-old girl with Sean Diddy Combs, which they both deny. The suit claims the alleged assault happened after the Video Music Awards in 2000, the year GenZ was nominated for Big Pimpin'. The mogul, husband of megastar Beyonce, calling the accusation heinous. Now his lawyers also firing back, saying these are false, unfounded allegations. The lawsuit was originally filed in October against Combs, GenZ's longtime friend, and an unnamed Celebrity A. But now it has been refiled, naming Celebrity A as GenZ.
If you remember when the Diddy stuff broke, I forgot who had told me this. Maybe it was my buddy Brandon or somebody. But on one of the episodes, I talked about how I think they're going to go after GenZ next. And that seems to be happening. Jigga what?
There is nothing unusual about the timing other than the fact that the client authorized us to amend the lawsuit and name Jay-Z as a defendant.
The anonymous woman, who was 13 at the time, described in the lawsuit as being drugged and raped at an MTV VMAs after-party she says Combs hosted. According to the suit, she recalls accepting a drink that made her feel woozy and lightheaded before she says she was raped by Jay-Z and then Combs in a bedroom as an unnamed female celebrity watched.
One thing I will say is, why is a 13-year-old at this party?
Now Jay-Z accusing the woman's attorney of trying to blackmail him in a demand letter, suggesting the attorney had tried to seek a settlement first.
These kinds of demand letters are sent on a daily basis across the United States, and attempting to attack me to take the focus off of the alleged perpetrator won't work, and it won't intimidate us.
Sean Combs remains behind bars awaiting trial on various federal charges, including sex trafficking, which he has pleaded not guilty. Busby has filed a string of civil suits against Combs, which Combs' attorneys have dismissed as shameless publicity stunts.
And Chloe, we don't know the identity of the accuser, which was the crux of a filing today.
That's exactly right, Lester. The accuser is currently listed as Jane Doe in the lawsuit, but just hours ago, Jay-Z's attorney filed a motion demanding that her identity be revealed or have this case completely dismissed. Now, ultimately, this will be the judge's decision, but it's also possible that the accuser, who is now an adult, could come forward and reveal her identity on her own, Lester.
All right, Chloe, I'm a loss. Thank you.
So that was Lester Holt reporting all that on NBC. I mean, again, I'm not saying Jay-Z is guilty by any stretch, but man, it's definitely not a good look. But like what I said earlier, you know, what is a 13-year-old doing at a party like that? I mean, that's odd. So anyway, we shall see what happens. We shall see what happens. All right, listen, crazy jumped around episode, House of Pain, 31 minutes. It's a wrap. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Honestly, sorry if I grossed some of you out with the talk about the magnesium citrate, but I'm telling you, if you clean out your internal body, it is absolutely good for your health. So that is it, everybody. All right, I will be back on Friday. Have a good one. Call a spade a spade. If you have questions on magnesium citrate, hit me up. Talk to you later.
Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Ho, H to the OV.
That was a great way to end it.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.